And I'm now joined by Chris Thomas, who's the chairman and CEO of BBDO Asia. All I know, it has got to do something with branding. So what exactly do you do at BBDO, Thomas?
At BBDO, we are one of the largest global advertising agencies. We've been around for over 120 years. Yes. We have around 15,000 employees, wow. 280 markets, 280 offices in about 70 countries around the world.
And you're just setting up shop in Kenya, yes?
We are here.
Why the Kenyan market?
Look, I mean, with the Kenyan market and the whole of the African market is obviously seeing explosive growth. Consumer brands very important. Many of our multinational clients becoming increasingly active here. And obviously we want to make sure we are here and affording the services we provide to our clients in those markets.
How do you compare, and I'm sure you've not worked in the African market, but now that you're getting into, and I'm sure you've had some data and collected info, how does it compare to the global trends?
Well, I think what's interesting is one of the things we've done is we've brought the African and Asian leadership closer together. Because I think a lot of the learnings that Africa can teach the world are very relevant to some of the developing markets in Asia, and likewise the same. So you see lots of similarities between high growth markets, how you reach people in rural areas, rise of the digital penetration, mobile handsets, etc. So lots of similar challenges between Asia and Africa, and we're learning from each other.
Now, just recently, Millward Brown issued a survey on the top brands in the world, and some two African brands featured, MTN and Airtel. Well, Bharti is not really African, but has presence in Africa.
Of course.
What do you attribute this kind of growth to?
Well, I mean, look, there's been essentially in the developing markets, if you look at Airtel's home base of India, India has skipped fixed line and gone straight to mobile, and it's primarily the main connection to internet. So you're seeing communications tools and those brands being used with enormous utility in those markets, in rural areas and in urban areas. So I think they're fantastic brands. I think Airtel's a fantastic brand and MTN's a fantastic brand.
And probably what lessons can African brand makers learn from the counterparts in the West, some of the people you've worked with?
Well, I'm interested in learning lessons from African brands, but obviously from our perspective, we work on a whole range of global brands. For us, the key is to make sure that the brand has a strong core idea and reason that it lives in people's lives, and our job is to identify that purpose and to communicate that as an emotional, engaging a way as possible.
Interesting. Now, and we're just still talking about brands and building brands. An issue that keeps coming up in Africa is that African corporates don't really know the value of their brands. Is that true, and how can they improve this?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I've looked at a lot of African brand work, and I think there is an opportunity to develop deeper engagement with consumers. And I think for us, BBDO is very much about our creative products. We call it the work, the work, the work. We're in the business of developing the world's most compelling commercial content. And the reason for that is there's a very powerful link between creativity, highly noticeable, visible work, and sales effectiveness. And I think that there needs to be greater creativity applied to brand building. And I think it's a very powerful discipline for all businesses and all brands.
Now, coming into Africa and, of course, trying to sell these brands that currently exist, and not just Africa, but also in other developing markets. What do you think are the unique stories in these kind of markets?
I mean, I think the stories in this market are ones of obviously rapid growth, rapid development, massive cultural diversity. So for brands and businesses, it's about managing complexity, but in our view, also boiling it down to what we call a reductionist nugget. What do you stand for? What are your values? What are your beliefs? And then you communicating those in a compelling way, in a way that can cut across media boundaries, cultural boundaries, and reach out to people.
Interesting. Now, still looking at trends in brand building and in commercials, really. We've seen a surge in the use of animations and cartoon, moving from the traditional, where we just have people talking and music. Where is this leading to, and what's the next stop for brand building?
Look, at the end of the idea, I'm not, for us, there are countless different ways of executing ideas. Animation is one. The rise of digital is another, which is giving us all kinds of extraordinary opportunities to reach consumers in different ways. So for me, it's not about the technique. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the creative ideas, and then we will look at what is the best technique for executing those ideas brilliantly in such a way that they create the most impact and engagement.
And now, you still coming onto the new market, African markets, we've seen multinational set up shop in Kenya, and not just Kenya, other places in Africa. how much of local involvement is going to be part of, say, BBDO in Kenya?
It'll absolutely be about local involvement. I believe that great brands and great work has to be rooted in culture. And obviously, you know, I'm not from here. I can't impose my culture on your culture, and I would make terrible mistakes if I did. So our teams are always, as far as possible, local people. But what we do is provide network support, huge organisation around the world who can provide resources, skills, knowledge that we can leverage in individual markets around the world. So in pretty well any category anybody was to operate in here, we've got learnings from developing markets, developed markets, learnings across all media, some of which may be relevant, some may not. Always it's about trying to find true cultural relevance to brands because that's what connects with people.
Now finally, Chris, as you set up shop in Africa, what are you looking forward to, and what sparks the excitement in this kind of venture?
Look, I mean, we love building operations from the ground up because we have a very powerful culture and we seek to preserve our own BBDO culture and to make sure that that's what we're applying to the market. So for me, I'm not excited about size. I'm not excited about growth. I have no...
Because I wanted to ask you, where do you anticipate competition from?
For me, the issue is about being good. And if you get great people on the ground, you produce really powerful work that builds our clients' business, then growth follows. So I don't measure growth, I measure quality.
And very, very lastly, there are, of course, brand builders in Africa currently, you know, from different places. How do, you know, the practice compare with global standards?
Well, as I said, I mean, I think that there are always going to be high points. Our job is to make sure that we bring in more high points. And for me, that's about doing what we do best, producing and delivering the most compelling commercial content. And that's what we're here to do.
Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. Chris Thomas from the BBDO coming to set up a branding shop in Africa. Something to look out for in the African market. Of course, we'll be keeping you updated.